Okay, I'm here with John Clippinger to learn about social physics and what's being done. So first of all, explain the concept. What is social physics?
Well, social physics, the simplest way to describe it is when Adam Smith, let me try this on you, really talked about the invisible hand of the market. I mean, how did that work? I mean, how did people seemingly without making explicit intentions self-organize to create efficiencies and create markets? And if you take that into a number of arenas, we find that there are certain rules, sort of social principles that govern sort of people's behavior at scale, and we're just trying to understand.
So it's the, sorry about the noise here, but it's the social rules of engagement, in other words.
Yeah, it's how people interact and cooperate. It's how they establish trust. There seem to be a set of underlying principles that not only apply to people, but any social species. I mean, this is what's interesting. So you have evolutionary biologists talking about notions of how trust and cooperation work. You look at neuroscience and saying how does certain kinds of social species evolve what they call social emotions that are very similar to us. I mean, people don't know that bats have a sense of embarrassment. So why do they have embarrassment? Because it's a form of social control. There's certain kinds of actions that take place that regulate their behavior as a group. And there's certain cues that people take to create affinities, and they act as a coherent.
Okay, and these are rules, and what you're getting
is
semi-universal. It's a semi-universality to these rules.
There really seem to be a certain universality.
Okay, and are these rules being changed in the digital world?
I think they're being expressed in the digital world. I think that they're being rediscovered in the digital world. I mean, the interesting. Just take eBay. No one would have thought that eBay. When Pierre started eBay, that four simple ways of rating someone, or creating trust, would scale to a multi-billion dollar organization, and yet it did. Why is that? Because people formed communities. They wanted to trust. They had built-in mechanisms of how to trust and enforce certain community principles. He picked that up. Now it fails in certain ways. There are other ways to work. There are workarounds. That seemed to be a very fundamental human characteristic. And that's just the beginning. And I should say that their basic research in neuroeconomics is a field, it's behavioral economics, there's evolutionary biology, is becoming very strong in this. It's providing certain kind of results that we use in designing new kinds of what we call digital institutions.
So let's go into that. Digital institutions with this new world where these barriers and friction is being reduced.
Right.
You're starting an institute?
That's right. We're starting a center at the Harvard, well, it's actually at the Berkman Center at Harvard. It's no longer the Law School anymore. But the idea is to study, not only just to study, but actually create a platform where you can start to run a series of experiments, just in the classic sense of small experiments, but what we call experiments in the wild. In other words, people can run experiments with tens of thousands of people on a reputation system. So does it work or not? Why doesn't it work? And how can we get gains? How can we create a more robust one? These kind of things. So in the law, you have ways of governing and controlling behaviors and enforcing them. And then you have to have the intervention of the state in some way to enforce it. There are ways in which it can be done within the context of a broader community. So you can have exclusion of provisions. I mean, someone was mentioning the world of Warcraft. I mean, it was Joey Ito, and he was saying, well, there's a lot of enforcement because people spend a year developing a character and they don't want to lose it. It's the same thing. Once you have an investment in it, there's real consequences to violating the rules of community.
And what you're going to be setting up is these rules of community?
We're really building, we're doing the research and the tools and the software. So in other words, say we want to build, we have a infrastructure that supports what we call a social computing cloud. And a lot of that's based upon work in open identity. But then you say you want to build a network of people to work together. There have to be rules of governance, how they share information, who has what rights, and all that's going to depend upon certain policies and also reputation systems. So who do I trust? If someone recommends something.
Well, back to Joey's example of his World of Warcraft guild.
Right.
Would you be setting up the kind of social contract that his guild would have?
Yeah, I mean, there's an implicit social contract in that guild, and that works in a certain context. And would it be nice that someone could have sort of like a drag and drop and say, here's the social contract we want to run this community, and so we'll abide by that. Now, may have different rules for different kind of communities or social networks you're part of. If you're doing something with a group of friends, it's very different than doing something professionally than doing something with healthcare. So you're going to have different rules that control how information is shared and contributed. And the question is for us is not to be prescriptive, but to be sort of understand the principles and then be able to create the tools that other people can do this.
Okay.
So we're an enabler, but it's located. So Harvard is at the hub, but there's a network of networks that we're going to partner with, not just universities, but other research centers and also companies or whatever, if they're willing to play by the open source standards.
Okay, because it's all going to be, at the end of this, you're going to have what? A series of open source
software releases. I mean,
software releases yeah, right. that will allow people to judge reputation within a community, set up a social contract, literally a digital social contract.
Digital social contracts, right. I mean, and the idea that we're shooting for is something like the iPhone and the application store. In other words, I can create an application for a social network on my phone, and then I can run it on my simulator, and then I can make it available on the application store. That, to me, is sort of the ideal model.
And then when I say something about a given topic, people will give it that amount of trust. When I behave in a certain way, you'll have
a reputation in a certain context, and so you may have a whole number of reputation metrics that are associated with your identity. So when you come into a site, you're going to get certain privileges or not privileges.
So has Berkman Center been involved in developing software like this before?
Yeah, we've done a lot of stuff. I mean, there's something called Higgins that we did over the last 4 or 5 years, which is an open identity system. Has now resulted in something, we supported it. We didn't write all the software ourselves. We helped support it, called the iCard Foundation, which now has Google, eBay, Equifax, PayPal, Microsoft, Novell, Oracle, they're all supporting this since they can do a standard. We also do things at Berkman into malware, so we're writing sort of software around malware. So there's a recognition, even when Berkman in the law school, that it's just not enough to write papers, you got to write code. So there's a whole transition into that mindset. So law is code.
Okay, excellent. And you're working on those new laws.
Right now.
Thank you.